You may ask the question why the stored energy may be transformed in rocket fuel and why that fuel may be transported upward instead of downward. The reason is the rocket fuel will be used at SSAS to fill up the spaceships which are docked there and which don't land on Earth. For a lift-off from Earth, about 80% of energy is used on the first 30 miles. Because of buoyancy, the FPTS needs only very little energy to reach its maximum altitude of about 18 miles. Anyway, the USST needs to shuttle between Earth's surface and SSAS for transportation of space modules. Why not loading rocket fuel at FPTS on its way to SSAS? That would save a lot of fuel instead of bringing downward and bringing up the fuel again. Thus, it's an economical way to produce and transport rocket fuel. These considerations are only a little part of thoughts embedded in a new strategical orientation for faster settlement in space, as you will see in the next parts of presentation. Every car was made separately and by craftsman's hand. The cars were very expensive and customers needed to wait a long time until they received one. One day, Henry Ford had the idea to build cars on an assembly line. Instantly realized cars were built faster, better, and cheaper. As soon as cars got cheaper, more people could afford them. Now it's commonly for us to use a car every day. But up to now, we built spaceships like they never were the brilliant ideas of American pioneers. Surely, to build a spaceship is much more complicated than to build a car, but at the beginning, in relation to the technological circumstances, it seems to be as difficult to build a car for the pioneers as to build a spaceship for our industrialized world today. We redesign and reconstruct a new spaceship for every mission, and thus it doesn't wonder that every spaceship becomes very expensive and has to be waited for a very long time. Well, when we talk about that point, we do not criticize the outstanding effort of the NASA employees and cooperating companies. We appreciate the effort and the results of running space programs, but would like to ask the question, if there isn't a path to reduce the costs and to reach some important strategic goals much earlier.
Usually, if you ask one of the big, well-known consulting companies to find a way to reduce the costs, their outcome is to reduce workspace, which means to set the people in front of the door. The reason for that is not because the people do a bad or unnecessary job. No, the reason is that these high-paid consulting companies do neither have enough creativity, nor do they have enough knowledge how to use new technologies or to implement subordinate strategies to reach a predefined goal. Instead, it's more comfortable for them to make the people redundant. We often have seen that this behavior brings more damage to the company and additional burden for social welfare systems than solving the predefined problem. Short-term action is easier accepted than long-term success. Therefore, we suggest another approach to the problem of reducing the cost for running space programs. Some parts of this new approach are also shown in our presentation.
The United States have all necessary resources at their disposal to build the SSAS for near space orbit within shortest time and for a fraction of the projected costs of running space programs. SSAS is made from prefabricated elements and serially produced models which will be transported to orbit by unmanned USSTs. Not every space worker assembling the elements for SSAS needs to be as highly trained as the astronauts working in ISS to also do a qualified job. Not every lift-off means necessarily to bring heavy freight together with a crew into orbit, while there will always be a high risk for their life during a flight in such a kind of shuttle or spacecraft. To reduce risk and costs, it is better to separate the transportation of very heavy freight from lifting up the crew into near space. The USST is unmanned and remotely controlled. So far, the programmed routines aren't allowed to do their functional tasks.
No one forces the United States to permanently show any kind of space success by well-covered media to legitimate a job which needs to be done on course to conquer the space. And no one forces the NASA to shoot very heavy freight together with people into space. So far there's an alternative. But it doesn't motivate the tax-paying people to realize that every mission to space needed permanently to be delayed as soon as there is bad weather or any other kind of problem, mostly coming from any little detail of any built-in technical group. As soon as the USSTs are available, very heavy freight and huge amounts of fuel and other necessary objects will be brought to orbit without any risk for man. No best-trained astronauts need to die. So far a leak will occur during liftoff. It doesn't really matter to lose an unmanned USST while freight is transported to orbit. The USST is only a machine built on an assembly line.
But it does really matter if the crew dies while they are on flight to space or coming back. The hope of the people depends on the success of the crew, not on the success or loss of an unmanned space shuttle bringing freight into space. Last but not least, the effort to bring a crew into orbit without up to metric tons of freight on board will be faster, cheaper, and less risky for everyone because of reduced weight and smaller spacecraft than the other way. Sorry, but so far it was a question of reducing the costs within the project, which prevented to build a capsule separable from the rest of the space shuttle for the astronauts, which could be dropped from the rest of the shuttle within a second after malfunction of thruster realized by computer and parachuting the crew healthy down to Earth, or to make use of a better heat protecting technology which doesn't endanger the life of the crew while losing parts of heat protection, that all only because of saving money. Then it would be better for the NASA not to bring further people up to space. Such a kind of cost-saving strategy will also make a journey to Mars like a self-killing mission for the crew.
Further, the Orion spaceship is too small, has too little resources, and no additional energy or thrusters to come back to Earth so far an accident or incident will happen on the travel to Mars. Also, it doesn't make sense to bring only a few people to Mars from decade to decade for the tremendous costs, only because there is a better strategy missing on the highest level of decision up to now. We call it our duty to show that embedded in the rebuilding of America's society and economy, there will be a much better support and higher resources available for the US space programs as mentioned in the presented sense. Your nation is able to reach important space goals within shorter time and for less than the planned costs so far. Our outlined strategy becomes approved on the highest level of political decision. We have emphasized that all problems are combined to each other and therefore need to be considered together. That means, especially for your nation's space program, that solving the problem in economy and on job market will make automatically more money available for developing the shown space conqueror, settlements and industries. That means a priceless opportunity for America to step forward to a new level of civilization. Why shouldn't space tourists watch on Twitter while space workers are assembling the SSAS?
The ISSs may be important for exploring the behavior of man, animals, plants, and materials under conditions of space and without gravity. The ISSs may also be important for international understanding. But for the build of SSAS and the new class of spaceships, as we are talking about, the US don't need approval or assistance of other nations, so far as the US could solve the economical and financial problems. The US are strong enough to do so. A new financial concept embedded into a general solution strategy, as we are explaining within our presentation, will help to solve the urgent problems, will bring new economic growth and full employment to the nation. While this will happen, the costs of health and welfare will also be reduced. The US don't need to pledge for other nations' help. Other nations also haven't solved their problems yet. Reflecting inner values and innovative potential, the US will be able to develop a new spaceship assembly station in near orbit and produce their new spaceships for settlement on other planets for a fraction of running costs and within a shorter time and without transferring the know-how to other nations. No other nation will thank the American taxpayer for receiving unaffordable knowledge to their institutes and factories at home. The US was losing too much of its technological leadership on all frontiers over the last decades.
And history will give the US nation only a short time for change. Other nations, like China, are on the jump to leave the US behind them. It will only be a short time of successful space programs in history. So far, the US government won't recalibrate their general solution strategy to solve the named problems together and soon. How can costs be reduced for further space programs?
As an example for a new approach to bring people without freight into orbit, we may take a look to Sir Richard Branson and his self-developed spacecraft Voyager. He shows us the right direction, which means leaving some parts of space travel to be organized and executed by private hands. That may be helpful not only to reduce taxpayers' burden, but also offers new chances for successful cooperation between institutions and self-standing engineers, technicians, and other qualified people, which not necessarily are only working within space contracts. There is an outstanding opportunity today to motivate millions of qualified people around the world to bring in their knowledge to the benefit of the US. That might be possible due to a new management and dealing of incoming proposals and knowledge from around the world based on the extensive use of object-oriented technologies and within a strictly hierarchy boxing of project and security levels. This point may save millions of dollars for the US government, developing space projects from the highest project level down to the little screw.
It means a flow of knowledge into the US supervised projects from qualified people from all over the world, without employing all these people surely. The project organization mentioned here will propel not only space projects, it will propel any kind of project faster to results and with less of its ordinary costs. While knowledge is flowing in, none of the important results will flow out of the US. Other nations may try the same, but so far the US are faster and better in using worldwide knowledge. The US will reach their goals first, not only regarding the recent space programs. And there will be many different possibilities to thank the qualified people from all over the world who are helping the US to bring the costs down and to reach their strategic goals. That's a point we're later talking about. Actually, it's enough to say it again. Separating manned travel of crew, space workers and space tourists from the transportation of heavy freight into orbit is an important step to reduce risks, costs and time while enhancing effectivity and the use of the taxpayers' money. As we show here, a new space industry will come earlier, offering new jobs, new training, new products and new commercial paths for trade and tourism. This means real success. So let's take a further look into future. The USS's President is the same for journeys in space what the Queen Mary II is for journeys on the open sea. As you can see, the USS's President will be finally mounted at the SSAS out of pieces that were fabricated on Earth. The transportation job for this will be done by the USST. As the USST is assembled in serial production, and there won't be too much damage if a USST shuts down or explodes. Particularly, no astronauts have to die in such accidents anymore, because the USST is an unmanned space transporter which can move in the dense atmosphere of a planet as well as in the interplanetary near space. Hence, the USST is, due to its construction, able to do the same job as it does on Earth on other planets too.
It is important to mention that the USS President also has sufficient technological and personal redundancy at its disposal. Even while optimally planned missions into space, an unpredictable incident can lead to a catastrophe if there isn't taken enough care during the planning and preparation station to provide sufficient redundancy, proper provisions to reduce complexity, and to encapsulate functionality. Hence, a suddenly occurring appendicitis or foodborne infection does not endanger neither the mission nor the life of the affected person or the life of other crew members. Of course, the USS President has medical modules and adequate personnel available on board.
Every model is already before its production standardized for its functional deployment and because of the high production number a serial product. This results from the fact that similar to the Queen Mary II, every passenger can move into his own, fully functional cabine, called living module. The living module has beside the intelligent electronic, which is encapsulated object-oriented, an own life support and hygiene system. These life support and hygiene systems are able to work separated from the bigger tank and disposal modules for a limited time. This means that in case of separation of such a living module, the tourists or crew members who reside in this module are not necessarily divulged to death. Instead, they can trust in being relocated into other living modules as if they aren't able to do this on their own.
Thus, it is not mandatory that all living modules are connected so far that they are continuously walkable, as it is the case with the ISS. Just out of reason for reducing complexity and at the same time enhancing security, it is more reasonable that every member on board has his own spacesuit, which is at every time available in his living module, similar to a life jacket in a cabin on a cruise ship, naturally converted to the present specifics of a space journey. So, every member on board can move out of one living module to another every time, even in the case that his module isn't connected directly to the other or it isn't habitable anymore. The communication with a commander module, which is functionally encapsulated and redundant itself, is reduced to exchange of parameters about the operating condition of the particular module or the well-being of its inhabitants. Even the blackout of one or more technical modules doesn't indicate a life-threatening situation, because they are also functionally encapsulated and available in a sufficient high redundancy. So, there is no supercomputer on board which has to survey and control every detail into its smallest part. Instead, they are decentralized and encapsulated functional units on the basis of existing technologies which are regulating the parameters themselves in an intelligent way and exchange corresponding messages.
The drive of the USSS President consists of independent, security-relevant redundant units, which work functional autonomous. Moreover, it's easy to maintain, robust and powerful. On the outer ring there are the rocket systems with the conventional construction, which are easy to repair and to maintain due to their location. They are supplied by huge tanks. As we saw before, the fuel for these rockets was won out of the energy of hurricanes. Through to fueling via the SSAS, the fuel becomes available for the USSS President. At least the SSAS is the same for the USS President as the port of registry for the Queen Mary II. Thus, here all service, supply, maintenance and repairing provisions, which cannot be completed during the journey of the USSS President, take place. At the SSAS, the USSS President also picks up all passengers and crew members. Due to its size, the USSS President will never land on Earth, and it doesn't have to. In the second inner ring, there are magnetoplasmatic dynamic engines located, which in low speed ranges are also supplied by tanks. In higher speed ranges, these engines receive a part of their fuel from the cosmic particle stream, which enters the collector steps in the front and which is split up in the downstream particle separator. This is reasonable because this particle stream isn't yet useful for fusion process, as long as the herefore necessary speed range has not been reached, but this particle stream doesn't have to be wasted too.
If the speed, which has been calculated by the computer and which is necessary for the initial self-ignition is reached, it will be switched between magnetoplasmatic dynamic engines and the fusion engine. The fusion process now takes place in the third and last step of the fusion engine and will support the USSS President with permanent drive in the high-speed range. Thus, the USSS President is never without drive, because the presented engine concept has enough redundancy that the drive systems can be supplied and work independently. Even the blackout of engines of the outer or middle ring doesn't menace the journeys of the USSS President if, out of whatever reason, the critical velocity for the fusion process isn't reached or the fusion engines is somehow damaged. The particle stream still supplies the left magnetoplasmatic dynamic engines in the middle ring. Of course, the technical crew on board of the USSS President is trained to do some of the accumulating maintenance and repairing works, as for example changing or repairing spare parts and components during a mission. For this, there are sufficient servicing and tool modules, as well as modules with spare parts, which are always carried along with the USSS President. Thus, the USSS President is primed well for regular journeys to other planets and back again. So, the USSS President can easily and fastly bring settlers to colonies on other planets, and regarding planet tourism, it can earn lots of money.
Here we want to point out that the manned journeys of the USSS President to Mars self-finance and additionally achieve huge profits. Tourists and settlers from all over the world bring money to the cash. Like the settlers and traders 250 years ago had to pay for their journey to the New World on their own, the tourists and settlers pay for their living modules with which they fly to Mars in the USSS President. Now it's understandable why these modules are complete functional units which are assembled in serial production. Like the settlers 250 years ago used his carriage as mobile home, like this the space settlers will use the living modules as mobile home on their journey to a new world, namely from the beginning of his journey until the settlement on another planet. The USA would not exist today if the settlers didn't come from the old world to the formerly unknown new world. Their courage, their diligence and their firmness made them seize a country that wasn't advantaged by nature and allowed them to make this country become that what the United States are today.
Today we have the same situation as in former times, but on a higher level of technological development. Right now, the government of the United States has it in their hands to advance the settlement of other worlds and to let the whole nation benefit from this. The other possibility is to build governmental towers due to which the settlement on other planets will be delayed for a historically short period, but which finally will allow another nation to settle strange world first and with exorbitant dynamic. But we would like to see the United States taking over a leading position regarding the settlement in new worlds. Also here comes the proverb, the early bird catches the worm, doesn't it?
Of course it does. This counts for settlement on new planets as well as for the deposit of natural resources and tourism on them. Additionally, a technical civilization, if it doesn't destroy itself due to its inner problems as it happens on our planet at the moment, can be much more sophisticated as the most people could ever imagine. Then perish the thought if we do not have anything better to oppose than what we have achieved until now. Evolution doesn't know mercy, and if God is going to help us when we pledge Him for mercy after a superior, extraterrestrial civilization has become aware of our planet, is literally written in the stars. It is better if we visit those planets firstly, which according to the opinion of astronomers and physicists are a possibility, than the inhabitants of those planets visit us firstly, if they exist at all. We actually know what Hernán Cortés and his only 670 men meant to the people of Central America after he arrived in 1590. Only a small technological superiority was enough to make the states and the original inhabitants to perish forever. Why should it happen differently to our planet if a technological superior intelligence arrives in our orbit?
A further reason endorsing a quick settlement on Mars, and not until the next decades or even centuries, has been brought by a hobby astronomer from Australia these days to our eyes, but the rest of the astronomic world has obviously missed out on that incident. On Jupiter, there has again a meteorite smashed and has left a huge black mark. Actually, a meteorite of the size of the one that recently smashed into Jupiter, not detected by the telescopes of the astronomers, is sufficient to catapult our civilization back into the time of the end of the dinosaurs, if at least something of our civilization remains. And further, at the moment we do everything civilizing possible to reawake the supervolcanoes on our planet. Approximately 74,000 years ago, when a tuba volcano on Sumatra reawaked, reams of species died. Further, approximately only 1,000 up to 10,000 men on the whole earth remained. We all originate from this man. At this time, this incident came close to an almost extinction of the human species. What will expect us if a supervolcano breaks out in near future and we are all at least absolutely unpremeditated? Will 300 million of Americans have to die all over the country, or will they be evacuated to Middle Asia just in time?
Or will a few surviving people be happy that there is an independent, autocyclic colony existing on Mars, to which they were able to flew just in time and on which they can stay for the next 200 years until Earth has appeased again? We are not redundant species. Under this aspect, it doesn't play a role in which manner we perish from evolution. It may be through a self-triggered chain reaction of catastrophes. It may happen through a smashing meteorite. It may happen through the impact of an extraterrestrial intelligence or through the breakout of a supervolcano. Until today, we do not have any genetic substitution for ourselves. Even more, we do not have found a second Earth to which we could flew if our first Earth had become uninhabitable. So there are plenty of good reasons to overbear all imagined and all actual hurdles so that we can solve all of the presented problems as soon as possible. And this without burdening the American taxpayer with an unacceptable high amount of debt. Courage and decisiveness of the early settlers on their way to an absolutely strange and unknown new world should be an example for us. Here we show that this example of the early settlers can be a warning and a reminder that we have to come back to the virtues so that the American nation can come back to the size and strength and is able to solve all of the upcoming problems permanently and to their use. The settlement on Mars will only fail due to the question of costs or due to delay through plenty of backlashes if no alternative financing concept is developed as the one that is permanently straining the American taxpayer or solicitant like being dependent on other nations, which also have the same problems as the USA itself. If we go on like before, there will be no progress which can accomplish more than an alibi function. Permanently rising costs for the American nation, and if there are necessary corrections made, this only happens in a snail's pace. It does not have to go on like that. At least it is more self-explaining and reasonable that projects of space travel, as for example the construction of the SSAS and the USSS president, are privately financed and organized at any rate. The settlement of Mars would be a natural result of the availability of SSAS and a USSS president. The US government would benefit from this profitable when the United States would set up a permanent presence on Mars first, at least would declare only parts of Mars to be American territory. The Mars office of the USA could, for example, sell searching, settlement and mining rights profitably. Also licensing rights and items of trade, which are exchanged in between Mars and Earth, could bring excellent profits to the United States. Last but not least, the United States would profit from the Mars turrets itself, which will be regarded on its own a booming branch.
For example, approximately 60,000 people have enlisted for a few minutes lasting flight into zero gravity with the privately financed spaceship of Sir Richard Branson. Such a flight anyhow costs $120,000. This sums up to at least $7.2 billion. Of course, Sir Richard Branson has actually not the capacity to handle such an amount of registrations for spaceflight. But this only means that there is a huge chance for the crude American space industry. There are sufficient financially strong private persons on this earth which would give away their funds, or at least a part of it, to fly into space or to play golf on Mars.
Well, I do not accept a future where the jobs and industries of tomorrow take root beyond our borders, and I know you don't either.
Fighting soldiers from the sky, fearless men who jump and die, men who mean just what they say, the brave men of the Green Beret, silver wings up on their chest. These are men, America's best. 100 men will test today, but only 3 when the Green Beret, trained to live off nature's land, trained in combat, hand to hand, men who fight by night and day, courage take from the Green Beret, silver wings up on their chest. These are men, America's best. 100 men will test today, but only 3 when the Green Beret. Back at home, a young wife waits. Her Green Beret has met his fate. He has died for those oppressed, leaving her this last request. Put silver wings on Nelson's chest. Make him one of America's best. He'll be a man they'll test one day. Have him win the Green Beret.
But this is America. We don't do what's easy. We do what's necessary to move this country forward.